Good evening, folks, and welcome to Geek Girl Cosplay Part 3. I am your host, Torrey. You can find me as Tereshkova Costuming on Instagram and Facebook. And in this series, we are taking a look, sort of a case study of the way I build costumes as I work through my Padme Amidala costume here. So that's the project of the moment here, like so. But before I get too far into that, I want to talk a little bit about sort of construction in general, how you do patterns, how you make costumes, sort of. So, yeah. Um, and before I even do that, I'm actually going to go ahead and start with an update from last time. So, if you were here watching the last stream, which you may or may not have been, no pressure, but if you were, that was fabric dyeing. And I dyed a fabric piece that basically didn't take any color. So I looked at my notes. This is why we always take good notes, folks. I took a good solid look at my notes, and I had moved the decimal point. So I used 1/10 as much dye as I was supposed to. So it sure didn't come out at all. But once I realized I had done that, let's see. The one downside of this, so this is my my Captain Marvel costume here, and the one downside is that the gloves don't work on the touch screen. So I just get to take them on and off all night. It's great. So I went back, having done the math, and I re-dyed, I redid the math and I re-dyed that costume piece, and it came out really nice here. So this is the finished, or one piece of the finished costume here. We'll drape this over the mannequin here so we have that as a good color reference. And this is what I re-dyed. So this is that same sports bra, and I'd used more, I did the math, double-checked it, triple-checked it, and it ended up coming up really, really nicely. It's not maybe like the perfect, it's not 100% perfect match, but it was never going to be, right? Because I knew that this isn't the same fabric. This is a cotton spandex mix, and this is pure cotton. I knew it wasn't going to be an exact perfect match. But what it is close enough that if the fabric shifts a tiny bit, I don't have to worry about a bright white stripe of edge of underwear showing, right? Nobody actually wants to deal with that. So what I'm going to end up with here is something that blends in. So like I'll check it before like big photos and important photos and stuff like that. But for the most part, and I'll keep an eye on it because crop tops tend to creep, but for the most part, it blends in really nicely and I'm very pleased with it. This actually also lets me show you a cool detail. Let's see if I can get some better light on the situation here. Alrighty. So this is kind of an interesting detail, if it'll focus. We'll think about focusing here. So the garment is edged with, it's got some serger thread sewn in there. There we go. You can see that the garment is blue now. It took the color pretty well, but the threads right here are still white because the threads are polyester, and polyester is real hard to dye. It's not impossible, but it's really a pain. And the dye that I used for the cotton, I knew already was not going to work on polyester. So we actually get this white stitching, and on the front of it, you can you can see the seam line because it's a texture difference. But if you look closely, you can actually also see the white thread in those seam lines. It's not that big a deal. It took, and down here where there's a little bit more sort of wrinkles around the edges, it was also a little slower to take. Again, you can see that stitching, the thread is still white thread, but it's not a problem. If I were making a garment from scratch, I might use cotton thread so that I could dye the thread, or typically and that's what I did for the main piece here, is I dye the fabric first, and then I match the thread to the dyed fabric, which just sort of seems like an easier option, generally speaking, is to do that kind of thing. So that's your update. If you do math, it works better, and you can see depending on the lighting, everything looks different, which is the frustrating part of this costume, is that it looks very different under different light. But it's still a pretty good color match for the most part. As I change where my desk lamp is pointing, it changes the temperature, and like it's a whole thing, right? Trying to color match is its whole own special thing. But that was last month, excuse me. I always think these are months, not weeks, or weeks, not months. So, yeah. So that's our update. Is that I was able to dye the fabric and it came out great, and that I just needed to pay attention because the funny thing is that what actually happened is I looked at the number and went, "There's no way that's 1%. You messed up and you did 10%." So I moved the decimal point, thinking I had messed up, and in fact went from 1% to 0.1%, which was not enough dye, so it didn't color. My bad. Luckily, it's pretty easy to fix that kind of problem. If I had gone the other way, if I had used 10% dye, there's no recovery from that. It would just be way too bright, and I would have had to go buy another one or just something. So if I was going to make a mistake, it was the easiest mistake to make. It was the easiest one to recover from. So that was good. All right. So patterning and mockups. You've picked your project. You've done a lot of research and you know what the thing's going to look like, and you've picked your fabric, and if you needed to dye it, you've dyed it. Then it comes time to start designing and making the outfit. And this overlaps a little bit with the fabric dye, because in some cases you need to know, you don't want to just dye, an entire bolt of fabric. You want to figure out how much fabric you need and then dye that much. So sometimes there's a little bit of kind of overlap where you figure out your patterns, or at least you figure out your yardage so you can dye that before you finish everything. Yeah. So one of the things you can do is to just use a commercial pattern off the rack, which I love doing. I find that very, very useful. So I've got a whole collection, helpfully, just off camera. Let's see. This is one of the first patterns I ever used for cosplay. Actually, it's a Simplicity Renaissance Festival costume. There is not a whole lot of historical accuracy in this pattern, but it makes a great Ren Fair costume. If you want historical accuracy in your Ren Fair, by all means, many people do. But I was just sort of going for like vaguely medieval. That's a great thing, right? We call them Renaissance festivals, but we really mean medieval. But anyway, this makes a great, it looks sort of vaguely medieval-ish kind of costume, which is all I was looking for. And you can just use a commercial pattern as it is, straight up, no changes, no nothing, just use that commercial pattern. That works great. My suggestions for that are carefully look at the measurements. Because the thing about the measurements for a commercial pattern is that they're based off of fashion sizes in like the 1970s-ish, which do not match current fashion sizes. They've changed, and if you, particularly if you've ever shopped for clothes in the women's section, you know just how frustrating sizing is, in that, a size whatever can be many different, very different physical measurements of garments under the same size number, and every store is a little different. And they keep changing them, they keep re-changing those sizes. So these patterns are based on a size from like the 70s-ish. It might even be earlier than that. The point is that you cannot go, yes, I wear a commercial size blah, I'll wear a pattern size blah. You don't wear the same pattern size as commercial size. Check your measurements. Get a friend to help you if possible, because it's difficult to take your own measurements. You want to make sure your tapes are even and all that. Take your measurements, compare them to what it says on the size chart. Don't panic about the numbers. Size numbers are made up and meaningless anyway, and the whole fashion industry is I have a lot of rants about the fashion industrial complex and the dietary industry, and like it's a whole thing. It's designed to make you feel bad. don't let it, or at least try not to let it. So check your actual measured garment measurements, body measurements on the commercial pattern. A lot of times commercial patterns are kind of loose and boxy. Depending on the garment, this can be fine. If you want the garment to fit more sleekly, or if you want it to just fit you really, really well, then you need to adjust it, probably, unless you happen to be the exact size and shape of their commercial model, which might be the case, but like probably not, right? Just sort of on general, there's only so many sizes of whoever their fit models were. So you can go through and adjust the measurements if you see, okay, well, I fit the waist here. Like these, for instance, I typically am one size in like bust and hip, and then the waist measurement, I'm like a few sizes bigger because it just doesn't think I'm not shaped the right way for a pattern. So sometimes I go through and modify the pattern. Sometimes I'm just sort of like, what if I just swear at it while I'm making it and adjust it live as I go? Yeah, you can sort of fuss with that. The best way to, if you really want to customize a commercial pattern, the best place to start with that is to go ahead and make a mock-up even of the commercial pattern. And I've had great luck not doing mock-ups. I'm not saying you have to. If you want to customize the fit, you should do a mock-up though. So like when I made my costumes off of this one, I just made them because it was just, for the Ren Fair. And this one is nice because these are lace-up bodices, which means they're a little bit forgiving because it's lacing up, so you can leave them wider or lace them tighter if you need to take that in a little bit. Or you can just be like, whatever, it's loose, I don't care, I'm gonna run around and get dirty and sweaty in it. I had to, so I worked at the Ren Fair for 2 seasons, and I had to get rid of my chemise because after those 2 summers of sweat and sunscreen and working the food service booth, no matter, I washed that every day. I washed that at least twice a weekend, and I couldn't get the smell of sunscreen and sweat out of it. So I was like, you know what? It's new shirt time, which is historically accurate because the underlayer against your skin is the one that absorbs all the sweat and grease, and that's easier to wash and easier to replace than that, hand embroidered jewel crusted silk confection you might be wearing over it if you're, Queen Elizabeth or whomever. So commercial patterns. So modifying them or mocking them up. Where is my pattern piece here? Yes. All right, cool. So from last month, I keep doing that. The last time we streamed, I showed off my Padme Amidala gown. This is the pattern it started life as. And if you look at it, you can kind of see that, right? It's a high neck halter dress here with the halter like so. I had to do a lot of changes, mostly, and it won't show up. Let's see if I can get it on the side cam. So the way commercial patterns work, right, is they've got all these, like I said, measurements and views and stuff. But they have these little tiny paper thin line sketches of what the garment looks like. And so these are the back views. And you can see these back views are like to mid back. And the Amidala gown runs to like below the waist in the back. It's completely backless. So I had to modify the back to make that. I had to redraft that whole back and redraft some pieces and do some modifications. But it was still a useful starting point, particularly for things like, to get the shape of that, to get the collar right, to get how much fabric do you need in those side panels here, right? So here you can kind of see, you can see it actually better on her here. There's an underbust, sort of a seam going on there that runs through to help give it some of that shape, and then everything flows from there. So I wanted to start with a pattern and then modify it. So what I did, and I didn't put this on the mannequin because you saw the finished garment, which is much nicer. What I did is I made that commercial pattern almost as is with really cheap satin. So I went to Joann's and got the cheapest polyester satin I could find. When you're making a mock-up, you want to find something that is cheap, Step one, cheap, because you're almost certainly not going to use this garment for anything. So you want to find something that's cheap, and you want to find something that has the same stretch and drape as your real fabric, or close to it anyway. So my finished garment was going to be silk charmeuse. So it's a very, delicate silk. I wanted a silky polyester that would give me, it's never going to be the same, but put me on the right ballpark. So I got cheap, like $3 or $4 a yard satin, and I made up that dress pretty much as that pattern is in the front. So you can kind of see halter dress. And then I went and started modifying the back. So instead of having so here's your neck here, instead of having the back come to mid back, I lowered it just sort of to see how much I thought would look good. There's a zipper in it here. And I didn't even bother to hem the bottom edges of it. I just left that as the raw fabric edge. It's fraying a little bit. I did actually wear this to an outdoor festival event once, but I didn't care. It was a mock-up. I was going to get ruined. I was going to get dragged through the dirt. Fine, whatever. It's cheap. I don't care. It served its purpose, which was making sure that I just used a safety pin. There's not even any closure on the back here. I just safety pinned it together. Because its purpose is to see if it fits right, to see what modifications I needed to make. How long does it need to be? Did I need the skirt to be fuller? What have you. It also lets you practice construction techniques. So if you're not sure how to make a thing, when you're looking at the instructions and you're like, but do what now with the how? Looking at making a mock-up is a way to try that. So you go through and you try, how do these things fit together? How does this things work? That's what, yeah, I'm gonna hold on that thought for a second here. So that's one of the things you can do is use the mock-up to try out techniques. If you're not sure how it's going to go together, make a mock-up. If you're not sure how it's going to fit, make a mock-up. If you're trying to design a pattern from scratch because you've had bad ideas about design, you should definitely start with cheap mock-up fabric. So that's actually what's on the mannequin over here, of which I am very proud. Bring her over here. So as you might be able to tell from my chair, I'm a pretty big Captain America fan. And this is based on the Captain America, the Avengers uniform. So from the 2012 movie, the Avengers, right? The first big MCU team up movie. We see Captain America in that sort of very practical uniform that looks, it's a modern version of the trading card uniform. So it's very star-spangled, it's very bright. It doesn't look as practical, but I love the effect of it. It's got some really cool seam details that I wanted to copy. So if I bring you in a little closer here, we've got this flap which folds over that has the star attached to it. We've got bust details here. It's two different colors of fabric. All of these details are copied from the jacket Chris Evans is wearing. I modified them a little bit because I don't have pecs like Evans does, but I have breasts. So I'm not shaped the way he is. So I modified that and I made it a skirt instead of a jacket. I wear it over leggings typically. So I modified that, but it's based on existing seam details. So all the seams you see are in the right place. We've got these underarm sorts of darker panels here to give more contour. All of these stripes, each of these is a different fabric here. And then the detail that I'm proudest of is actually on the back of the garment, where these seams come together. If you follow the big lines here, they make a 5-pointed star. And that is how it is on Evan's jacket. I promise I did not make that up, that this is exactly what his jacket looks like. And I replicated it and I'm so proud of it. But to do that, I had to make several mock-ups because there's just no good way there's no commercial pattern that does that has that kind of detail. So I'm sitting there going, welp, somebody made it. It's got to happen somehow, right? So I did manage to get that to work. through a lot of trial and error. And so I went through and I mocked it up out of cheap bed sheets. Bed sheets are one of my favorite mock-up fabrics here. Yeah, and then so the seam details here, this panel actually runs with no waist seam here all the way down, and then you've got these side seams in here that you can just kind of pick up. So I like to use old bed sheets for a mock-up because old bed sheets are cheap, right? You can get them at Goodwill for you know, a few bucks. Make sure you wash them because stuff from Goodwill sometimes smells a little funky because they use a sanitizing spray on it. So make sure you wash them, but sheets are good. Muslin is good. Thank you for liking my details. Muslin is good. I actually just bought a bunch of fabric. I was cleaning up my sewing room so that this would be cleaner for this, and then here I am tearing everything apart of it out of it. Yes? No? Yes, no. We'll just grab one of these pieces here. It's fine. I was able to pick up, so this is from something completely different. We'll talk about that eventually. But I was able to pick up this fabric here is like $3.50 a yard if you buy 10 yards of it. And because I'm mocking up stuff, I went ahead and did that. But it's called Osnaburg, $3.50 a yard. It's got a nice weave to it. I'm actually using it as part of the lining for this project here, which I will at some point. Actually, this month might be a good time to talk about that one a little bit. We'll come back to that a little later on. But the point is that you can use muslin, you can use Osnaburg, use cheap fabric, and use fabric with the same kind of stretch, if you can get it, as your real fabric. So this is actually all made out of stretch fabric, and I was mocking it up with bed sheets, which typically don't stretch, which I probably should have used stretch for the mock-up, but it came out okay, and I really like it. I'm really, really proud of this one. So yeah, I got to wear that for some of the virtual events we were doing last summer, and who knows, maybe we'll do something 4th of July themed this year virtually, and I'll break this one out. I've got a couple other Cap outfits because it's fun. And because once you have a Captain America shield, like everything is an excuse for a Cap costume. So make your mock-ups out of fabric that has the same stretch as what you're gonna wear, if you can. That's a problem when it comes to spandex. So the bodysuit that I'm wearing here, let me go ahead and suit back up. One of the classic Captain Marvel poses is in fact the yanking the glove on, so that's always fun. So this bodysuit here is entirely handmade from scratch, all the way. And that was kind of a pain because I basically couldn't mock it up. I wanted to, I would have loved to, but this is a full body stretch garment. It has to be, any mock-up would basically have to be the exact same fabric as this. So what I did, I found there's a website where someone has the formula basically for making a bodysuit. Where it talks about, okay, you know, take these measurements, and it's very detailed. Like this particular one is fitted around the curves of my calves and my thighs and all the way through my arms. You can actually follow the fabric gets wider and narrower around those curves, which is kind of cool. So you take like these millions of circumference measurements and you copy them down on paper, and you have to account for how much the fabric stretches, because different spandex stretches different amounts. So if you happen to have a really stretchy spandex that stretches a lot, you want your starting measurements to be different because as the fabric stretch, you know, it stretches around you. This whole garment is stretched as I'm wearing it. When I take it off, it shrinks basically, because I'm not in it. It's kind of fun because if I were to, I'm not obviously going to, but like when you undo, when I put it on, the whole thing just sort of holds open and I have to zip it closed. There's a lot of pressure on it. If I tried to mock it up out of any other fabric, it wouldn't have fitted. It wouldn't have worked. So what I did is I made the whole thing. I cut out and traced out these patterns and cut out the whole thing and then adjusted it while I was wearing it. so that I could say, okay, it needs to come in here or come out there, or like the pattern on the base directions were written by a man. So I had to go through and sort of be like, that's not quite how boobs work, my dude. Um, and go through and sort of fix the fit a little bit. It was an easy fix, but I had to do it live. Basically, I had to do it on the garment. Um, and then I got to come in. Okay, so I'm so proud of this. So I'm just going to talk about this for a second here. So this is a Captain Marvel uniform. It's one that she wears for part of Jonathan Hickman's 2015 run of Avengers, where some of the Avengers are working with Shield, and so they all have these super slick black and gray outfits. Let's see here. There we go. Like so here. So you see we've got Iron Man and several Iron Man drones and War Machine and the Sue Storm, but she's got a Shield insignia instead of a Fantastic Four insignia. We've got Hawkeye all in black. We've got Captain Marvel all in black and silver. And I just kind of really liked it. It's interesting. It's different. And it's kind of a fun challenge. So I went with black for the main bodysuit, gray, sort of a silvery gray for the shoulder panels, and then a metallic silver for the insignia across the star there. I have very rarely, sadly, been recognized. People tend to think that I am Aurora from Alpha Flight, which, like, how do you know what Alpha Flight is? Nobody knows what Alpha Flight is. Alpha Flight is the Canadian superhero team. It's roughly the Canadian equivalent to the X-Men, because some of them are mutants, but yeah. Emo Squad. Well, you're not wrong. So let's see here. We had some fight team-ups, but the best one, I think, here's the comics cover that had her on it here that I sort of used as one of my primary references, like so. That is a Jamie McKelvey cover. Jamie McKelvey is the artist who designed the Captain Marvel uniform in the first place. And so so I had to come up with, so coming up with the pattern for this inset. So it's not an applique. There's actually a seam connecting the black and the silver gray. Let's just go and call it gray here. And then that seam is covered by the silver applique, which is sort of convenient. And it helps that, like, there's a visible zipper. It's not, like, yes, it's impossibly skin tight on her. Then, like, it kind of looks like body paint in that particular image. But, you can still sort of see how she gets in and out of it at the very least. So yeah, so I made the whole bodysuit in black and then came through and figured out where I wanted to put in the angles here and cut that out of the gray and stitched them together. And then, put in the zipper and put on the silver applique, which I'm very, very pleased with how that came out. I made and inset the piping myself, which you can actually see. We will switch for a second here, which actually runs all the way around. So that's a full set of piping that runs through the underarm seam here, which again, you can see in the comics references. So this was a case where I designed the pattern and couldn't mock it up quite as much as I wanted to. There was some mock-up, there was some, adjusting of the fit and the tweaking, but most of it was for fun, was sort of, do it in production. But the other reason that I love this outfit is that it is, I'm gonna pull up, are they on the PDF scans? They are. Here we go. This is, so I don't have the issued numbers in here, unfortunately. But when Kamala Khan first gets to actually really for real meet Captain Marvel, this is what she's wearing. This is what Carol's wearing. And so like they're actually hanging out here. And that was just kind of a really cool detail to be able to have of like, this is when they meet, because I love Ms. Marvel and I love the mentorship relationship that the two of them have, and it's just delightful and charming. This particular arc is kind of rough because like they can't stop the end of the world, but they also kind of like have some fun. And so having that outfit, it was kind of like, okay, this is kind of cool. And I've got some cool team up photos with some Kamala cosplayers. And I actually, the very first time I wore this was at NorwestCon, the Seattle area literary sci-fi convention, but they have a little comics track. And G. Willow Wilson is a Seattle local. And so she was there. The author, the creator of Kamala Khan Ms. Marvel was there, and I got to meet her and show her this outfit and get some selfies with her. And she's just a delightful human. I recommend following her if you don't already, because she's just such a sweetheart. So yeah, so this is my Captain Marvel outfit. I'm very, very happy with it. It's very panel accurate, even if most people think that I'm from Alpha Flight. I have learned to accept that. I have learned to expect that and occasionally have to tell people. Sometimes people get it. Sometimes they do. But Aurora's star is a kind of different location, and she's white, not gray, but whatever. It's fine. It's not that I don't like her. It's just that that's not what this is. Oh, but I do have one other detail. So you can kind of see it in, let's just go back to my weird awkward screen sharing method. You can kind of see it in that panel here that the gloves have these weird button details. Thanks, McKelvey. And if you look at, nope, there we go. If you look at, so the great thing about this outfit is that it is an absolute replica of her normal blue and gold and red outfit. It's just different colors. So I was able to use some of that as reference. And so she does the, dramatic glove pulling on thing. And so these, I made the gloves as well myself, right? You can see they're match. And for these, I actually did another cool pattern technique, which is I copied an existing garment. So this was total coincidence. It was great though. When I was making this outfit in 2015, my friends and I happened to go to the Seattle Opera trunk sale, which is where they sell off all their old costumes and fabrics and stuff that they just don't need anymore. And you can get, like, you have to line up for hours and you can get some killer deals. Presumably they haven't done one in a while, but they'll get there eventually. So super, super fun. And we're just there to, we don't have anything in mind. We're just there to see what it is because we've never done this before and it sounds super cool. And they happened to have some sample gloves that their glovier had made for them to be like, here's all the cool things we can make. So they had like single unpaired gloves for $1. And I went, cool. And I bought one and took it apart and used it as a pattern. So I just copied that. This is an exact copy of that glove. I mirrored them, and then I figured out how to do this inset nonsense. But I just very carefully seam ripped apart the glove and then copied those patterns. Because that glove happened to fit. And again, it's stretched. So in this case, it's actually pretty forgiving, right? A lot of gloves are more or less one size fits all. So that actually wasn't too bad to just tear it apart, copy it, trace it, sew it together. Gloves are annoying to sew, particularly if it's spandex. They're kind of forgiving. So since then I've made several pairs actually. I've made some out of leather. I've made some out of several different ones out of spandex. I've done some that are shorter or longer. My Carol Danvers Ms. Marvel costume has, I did short wrist gloves and then long arm sleeves so that I can pull the glove off but still have the effect of the costume, which is kind of nice. So yeah, that's kind of fun. So I just, laid down the fabric, traced around it, and made that a pattern. And I still have them somewhere. I could probably find it, but it'd take me like 10 minutes. Um, my my pattern storage system is sort of, a heap of, like, I know roughly what's up there, roughly, but there's also a lot of mystery items in there. So somewhere in there are my is an envelope full of glove pieces. So yeah, so you can copy a pattern off an existing garment. That doesn't always help for cosplay. I mean, it does for things like gloves, accessories, but a lot of cases it's like I didn't have one of these before I started to make it, right? I didn't have one of these before I started making it. But if you have like a favorite dress that is either wearing out or you want more of or you want in a different fabric, you can copy a pattern without taking the garment apart if you lay it down carefully and trace around the fabric shapes. Or you can flip the garment inside out and put painter's tape on it. So you'd actually tape down strips of painter's tape across that one fabric panel. You trace it, make it fit, peel that off, and then stick it down on a piece of paper and copy a pattern that way. And I actually did that. I was in a fabric store. I have a very firm rule in fabric stores. I may not purchase any fabric for which I do not have a confirmed, guaranteed project for. I am allowed to come up with that project in the fabric store staring at the fabric I want, but it still has to be a real project. I am not allowed to just buy fabric because I think that would be cool, because that way lies not having room in my house to exist. It's not a rule for anyone else, but it's a personal, very hard limit. Um, and they had this stretch knit with tiny little Captain Marvel insignia prints on it that I was like, this is so cute. I will make a sundress. And I actually copied an existing sundress that I have that has pockets and stuff. And I was like, this is I love how these dresses fit. They're cute. I wanted it this specific fabric. And the maker would never make them because the maker doesn't do licensed replicas. So I was like, all right, I will copy that pattern. And at least one friend was like, did you buy that from that company? And I'm like, I did not, but I stole their pattern. Um, yeah, so you can copy existing garments. Also works great if you don't have, if it's like falling apart or wearing out. And you're just like, I just want this again. Well, you can make it again. So the other detail, which is not a pattern related detail, but I love it anyway, so I'm gonna show you, is the glove detail. So what we can see in the art is that she's got buttons, at the collar, she's got buttons on her gloves, and she's actually got them on her boots as well here. There we go. Yep, she's actually got them on her boots. These are actually boot covers because the real underlying boots were way too cool not to keep. They're this like suede patchwork kind of a thing going on, and they're super fun designs. And I was like, I'm not gluing spandex to these boots. I wish to keep them. So I actually just made an improvised. It's basically a big sock that just stretches over the boot to cover that, and then fits over, tucks under the heel, peels off like so. They're great boots. I've used them for at least one other costume, as well as but this is just cute. So I needed several different sizes of buttons, right? We've got these big ones for the boots. The gloves are a smaller size because the gloves are smaller. So I needed a few different sizes of some neat buttons. And so what I did, and I was very smug about this, is I thought about the character. Captain Marvel, and they kept this for the MCU, Captain Marvel is in the Air Force. And it turns out that Air Force uniform buttons are silver. So these are all actual Air Force uniform buttons that I found on eBay. I got a lot of way more than I possibly could ever have needed. And I have sewed them on there. So they give that sort of neat, interesting looking detail, like so. Same thing on the collar up here. Different sizes. I ended up with a bunch of extras as well, but I just really love that detail because not only do they look cool, they're correct for the character because Captain Marvel, like I said, was Air Force. She actually outranks Captain Rogers because she retired as a colonel. So there's a great one-shot comic book by is it Warren Ellis? Yeah, I think it's Warren Ellis, um, which is just charmingly delightful in like Steve and Carol are just giving each other crap about, well, I outrank you and Army versus Air Force, and it's silly and delightful. I only recommend it because the people Warren Ellis has harmed have said, don't take the harm out on everyone else who was involved in his books. And if you have questions about Warren Ellis, feel free to message me later or look him up online. He's sadly, because his work is great. But one of the things about liking problematic things is you have to sort of be aware that they can be problematic. So, but the banter is fun. The banter is fun. So let's see. Okay, so mocking up with spandex, always an exciting challenge. A lot of times you make a mock-up and it's not for anything, but every now and then you make a mock-up and it's very useful. So we're gonna let it is much too warm in here, so we're gonna let the mannequin demonstrate these things here. So a while back I wanted to make a cloak for my Jedi. If you are a regular viewer of this stream, you might have encountered Jedi General Piva explaining how to make fabric masks. And this is her cloak, like so. This is made out of wool. There are probably at least 8 yards of wool in this garment, but hoo boy is it ever worth it. It is gorgeous and comfortable, and the hood does this wonderful Jedi thing where it's really big and drapes everywhere, like so. But this particular pattern is one that I wasn't familiar with. So like a cloak is mostly a lot of straight lines, and that's fine, that's not hard to do. But this one is based on one Anakin Skywalker wears in Attack of the Clones. And so it's got this interesting, they're not sleeves, it's kind of like a front shawl scarf piece, kind of a tabard built into it here that integrates into the hood of the garment. So it kind of runs up, and I just wasn't sure. Like, I wasn't sure about it. And I also wanted to make sure exactly how long did it need to be and how big did the hood need to be. Because the thing about Jedi is they have these really big hoods, but there's also still a limit. Like, you don't want to absolutely completely vanish forever in it. It should be big, it should drape, it should sit in big folds, but it shouldn't completely swallow you whole forever and ever. So in order to sort of figure out what I was doing for this, I was like, all right, I'm going to make a mock-up. Also because I got this on sale. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was because I got it for half off and I got a great deal on it. But this is probably at least $20 a yard wool, if not more. And there's like 8 yards of wool in this thing. So I wanted to make it out of something, I wanted to just try it. And I wanted to do it out of not this because I didn't. And the other thing is I got that on a going out of business sale. So I was like, I'm never going to get any more of that. So I made it out of polar fleece. And this actually served all of the purposes of a mock-up. So you can see it's got the same strappy details, like so. It let me figure out how long. I actually made a couple changes from the way this fits. I changed a little bit about the shoulder yoke and how that fits. And I changed the hood a little bit to make it not quite, because it was ridiculously big. So I scaled it down a little bit here and then further down in the final. But now I have a polar fleece cloak, which is the most amazing thing when it gets cold, because you can just sort of drape it around yourself and then you're warm. And then when you need to get up, so it's like lying on the couch with a blanket, but when you need to get up, it comes with you. So it's really super great. I spent the fabric, and plus I got this sort of fun, you can see a theme here. I have this fun Captain Marvel licensed fleece here, which was I could have gotten just cheap print stuff or plain stuff, but I kind of was like, oh, this is kind of fun. I want to tell capitalism that they should make more Captain Marvel things. Um, and I wanted it, so I made it out of that. But it's really nice. So not always, but sometimes you can turn your mock-ups into useful garments. Yeah, no, it is so cozy. It is so nice. I love it. So, cozy fleece. And then this one I did actually hem this one just to get a feel for that. But it lets you practice those weird construction techniques where you're not sure how it's going to go together. So that when I made the real one out of wool, I just bam did it, and it was super easy. So that's how I like to do mock-ups, is construction tests or technique tests or fit tests, or all of the above. And sometimes it helps you make design decisions, honestly. Like sometimes if you're not sure if you want to put a this thing or a that thing in it, making a mock-up will help you see, oh, okay, yeah, I do want this, or I don't want to bother with that, or this thing just doesn't need to be there, whatever. So you can fuss around with that. All right. So this is supposed to be a case study of a particular project. So I should probably talk about that project a little bit. Yeah. So with the Amidala gown, or I don't know if gown is quite the right word for this here, with this ensemble here, it's a two-piece, it's a skirt and a top, well, three-piece. It's a skirt and a top and a cape. One of the things is that because it is, it's a jersey, it's basically heavyweight t-shirt material. Like if you think of your heaviest but coziest of t-shirts, it's like that. It's got stretch. So mocking it up was going to be tricky, particularly because that top, let me see if I've got some sort of closer in details here, only kind of, that top is a wrap top under tension. Like the way it stays is it wraps and it hooks around at the underarms, which means I needed to know how much stretch that fabric was going to have in that way, in that orientation. There was basically no other way to do it than to do it out of the real stuff. So I did a lot of sketches and I did a lot of coming up with pattern ideas, but to when I started doing mock-ups, I did them out of my actual fabric, which I then took apart and dyed. So it actually became the final garment. I just had to dye it after that. And I always recommend dyeing fabric, not garment, whenever possible, because that way, you're not trying to get into like the creases and the folds and the seams. You're not worried about the thread dyeing or not dyeing. Dye your yardage. Plus, that way you can dye extra if you can. In this case, I'd already sort of cut out most of the pieces, but I dyed them as separate pattern pieces, not as a finished garment. Because again, that makes it work a little better. All right. So, so the first thing that I did was I go, is it a skirt or is it a pants? And this particular case was tedious, because there's some conflicting information. So I actually got to see this outfit in a museum, which was really cool. And the placard said top and pants. But some of the pictures look like pants, and some of the pictures look like skirt. And I agonized, I waffled, and I was like, what is it? Is it this? Is it that? I don't know. I can't tell. I'm just, and I asked, so I got some, I got all the photos I could, and I asked some folks in some of the Padme costuming communities, what do you think it is? And they were pretty much all like, well, I think it's a skirt. And a couple people were like, no, I think it's pants. And I was like, I think it's pants, but I'm not sure. I ended up settling on it being a skirt. Even though the museum said it was pants. Because there's some parts Do I have them in this slideshow? I don't. Because there's some parts where it really does look like some of the panels just don't quite make sense for it to have been, let's see if I can show them. Yeah, there we go. Some of the panels just don't quite work the way they would work if it was as pants. And that is here. So over here, so this is again a museum display piece. This sort of triangle wedge piece here doesn't make any sense if it were pants. Like they could be very full pants, but it couldn't, that wouldn't work. It wouldn't quite do the thing. So I decided that based mostly on this photo, it has to be a skirt, even though some of the ways she moves in it are kind of funky. If we come over here to my screen caps folder, let's see. Some of the things she's doing when she's getting out of the rickshaw or whatever it is here. Some of the folds are kind of weirdly anchored and stuff like that. So when you're doing custom patterns, the first thing to do is to agonize over your reference photos, to try and figure out what the heck is going on. And like, there's got to be a seam here somehow, but why is there a skirt with a seam in the front? That doesn't make, none of it makes any sense. None of it makes any sense. But here we are. So, what I ended up coming up with for as a pattern for this part here is it's a tight-fitting skirt with a panel in the front. Skirt. Here we go. So we'll just zip that up in the back here. Skirt. Skirt. So it's a wrap skirt here. It drops down in the front, higher on the sides and back. It's a fairly simple gored skirt. So we've got, long panels that get wider towards the bottom. There's actually a panel dropped in at center back rather than have a center back seam all the way down the way a lot of skirts might. I actually have an extra triangle panel. Of course, it's not coming out well on the video, but there is one. There's actually an extra triangle panel to give some of that extra flair. And then in the front, this whole pleated detail is separate. So if I come in from the inside and show you what's going on the inside of this garment here, there's a skirt and there's a center panel right here. You can see the seams right here. There's a like 3 or 4 inch wide center front panel. Sewn onto that narrow panel is all of this pleating. So if we come down to the hem, here's the pleated panel. It's actually looped around and sewn in to that narrow strip of cloth here. So that's my narrow front panel. This is all of the extra that's part of the pleating, because that was the only way I could make it make sense with the seam lines we see in the original and the movement we see in the original. So stare at your reference photos, stare at them some more, figure that out. So I made so I made the skirt, and I did need to take it apart a couple times to try and figure out, exactly how wide does it need to be. I inevitably have a problem, like I either make skirts too tight or too loose, and then I need to take them in at the sides one way or let them out or put extra panels in or something. So I have to sort of fuss with how does it actually fit my knee. Part of the problem is that my dressmaker's dummy isn't exactly my size and shape. I definitely recommend having one, particularly if you create patterns at all or if you're tailoring things. But ideally it should be your exact size and shape. And there's a whole bunch of tutorials out there on how to make a duct tape dummy, um, where you wrap yourself in saran wrap, wrap yourself in duct tape over the saran wrap, cut the duct tape off, and then stuff it with like polyfill or stuffing or whatever, so that it's your exact shape and size. Because nobody looks exactly like a commercial mannequin. They're made to be sort of as average as possible, and inevitably they're too big or too small in some dimensions, even if they're approximately right. So mine's approximately right, which partly means that things never quite fit. If I make them for the mannequin, they never quite fit right, or I make them for me and then they are weird on the mannequin, and it's all a whole thing. So yeah. So I fussed with the skirt a little bit, and then I put the front detail in here. What if you didn't wash out weirdly? Thank you. So that front detail, there's a lot of gathering here. So part of what I did is the side panels are actually really tall. The side panels actually come up to like here and are then gathered down and sort of squashed down into the skirt here to give this kind of pleating along the sides here. So the pattern shapes don't make any sense if you lay them out flat. Because it's like, why is the skirt like this? Well, because I wanted these wrinkles. This, and the same thing over here. This part here, if I get the beads temporarily out of the way, the fabric here is done using an Elizabethan era technique called cartridge pleating, which is where basically you gather it with like really big gathering stitches, but you put a bunch of them in, like so, the whole length, and then you pull the stitches and the fabric kind of pleats itself up. So you're very careful about the spacing of your stitches, and you pleat them and they crinkle in like this. It took me an embarrassing, for somebody who used to be a medieval reenactor, it took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out that that was how this was done. Because part of it, because I was looking at the pictures with the beads over it, which doesn't help because they, block things. But for some reason, I just couldn't figure. I was like, that's a problem for future Torrey. Present Torrey is fitting the main body of the skirt. And then eventually my brain was like, hey, you know what it is? It's that thing you hate from Elizabethan era. It's cartridge pleats. And I kind of went, oh, of course it's cartridge pleats. Why didn't I see that? It felt, as somebody who had done that kind of thing, it felt really obvious and like a thing I really should have, like that I'd been really missing. But at least I know how to do cartridge plates. So normally you do them with like a stiffer fabric than jersey, but that is the correct technique for this. And then I put the beads on there. We're going to talk about beading and stuff like that next month. We're going to talk about that next month in terms of finishing techniques and couture finishes and stuff like that. So yeah, so cartridge pleating was the technique here. You might be surprised how much historical influence there is in Star Wars costumes, in Amidala's costumes specifically. A lot of it is various historical, European historical, a lot of Asian contemporary and historical, Native American design. It's really, really cool. There's all kinds of stuff, which means that there's a lot of historical techniques that work for that, because it's like, oh, this is cartridge pleating. That's what it is. End of conversation, which was kind of cool. So, yeah, and then the other thing that's kind of cool about this is it's a stretch, right? If I grab here, it's a t-shirt material. You can kind of see it's got a little bit of stretch to it, which is great. This is so comfortable. But if it stretches and it's a wrap skirt with a bunch of extra weight in the front of it, that was not going to go well. That was just going to sag down and risk falling off because it stretches. And so it would sort of stretch its way off. So in order to prevent that, and I got this, other people who have made this costume describe the same problem, so I was prepared to put it in there, and I did need it. It's got a facing on the inside here. So this is actually theatrical scenic muslin. This is what they make stage backdrops out of, because I hemmed some of those for a friend and said, I'll do it for you for free if I can keep the offcuts. I used them for mock-ups for a little bit, but honestly, it's better for something like this where it's actually structural to the garment. So I've got this big long panel in here. Part of its job is to help finish the edge. so that instead of having like a waistband or anything, it's just sewn like so. There's my raw seam here, but it's hidden. The edge folds over and hides that, so you never get the raw edge. You get this nice finished over folded edge. But the other thing is that this doesn't stretch. So the muslin, and you can see I've sewn bits down to it here. There's a fair amount of make it work sorts of construction details in here. And then I put a blue facing in there so that the muslin doesn't show. But what that does is that it doesn't stretch, so that I use a zipper to get into the skirt and it holds it and anchors it in place. So the blue fabric can stretch and be soft and comfortable, but the waistband remains secure because I don't want this falling off my hips. That's just a bad day for everyone. So by integrating this non-stretch fabric to the stretch garment and basically canceling out the stretch here, I can't get any good give because the muslin doesn't give. It helps support it, which is pretty cool. So that's how the skirt ended up going together. I hand hemmed the bottom of it because it was gonna show if I didn't, and nobody would care about me, but I would care. Which is frankly the moral of most of my costuming is nobody cares but me, but I care a lot about like these weird little details. So I serged the raw edges. What are you picking up off the floor? Please stop. I serged the raw fabric edges so that they wouldn't roll or ravel, and then I hand sewed them down. So if you look on the outside, you can kind of see the stitching, but it's a pretty mild detail. And when I'm wearing it and standing up and you're talking to me, nobody's going to notice that from standing up. If I just run a seam through there, it might be a little more noticeable. But also you can kind of tell that this is how the original garment was hemmed if you look at it. So if that's how they did it, that's how I'm going to do it. Yeah, so that's how I patterned the skirt. Was pretty much just trial and error. I didn't use a commercial pattern for this one. I just kind of did it. So that's one part. That was probably, well, that was the middling difficulty part. The cape, which we're going to talk more about next time because I want to talk about all the stamping details. The cape was a very easy pattern because all I had to do was figure out how big I wanted it. And then it's just, it's a couple of big, not quite semicircles. Although the cape was actually really fun to pattern because what I did, it's very big. It's a knee length in the back and the front drape is pretty long too. It's a lot of cape. I didn't want to have to mock up that whole thing. So in order to pattern it, I borrowed my roommate's artist mannequin, one of those little, 12-inch tall posable wooden figures with no faces or anything. And I grabbed some brown paper bag paper, and cut that out and put it on the artist mannequin to see roughly what proportions I wanted. And it worked surprisingly well. And to figure out how I was going to do the being able to put it on and take it off. So I was actually that worked really well. I was really pleased with that. I have that mock up somewhere, but it's not right where I can find it. But I actually just sort of figured out how to put it on and take it off the little wooden model, which was fun. So I didn't bother to mock that one up because there wasn't a whole lot to it. I had to adjust the armholes slightly so that I could get my arms in and still move them. But again, because it's stretch fabric, it's pretty forgiving. Which is the great thing about stretch fabric, is that it is forgiving because it stretches. It will stretch around things or over things. And so if you make something a little off, it will often stretch to fit. Yeah, which is nice about this outfit. So, I've made some of my costumes before I started working out, which means sometimes they're a little tight through the biceps or the shoulders, where I've gained some mass, and they stretch around that. Other garments that do not have stretch do not work around that. And the same thing is true for whatever reason you may have gained weight or changed body shape for any reason. Stretch can forgive that. Um, it can also, whatever. Stretch is surprisingly forgiving. Um, yeah. So the shirt is like I said, it's a wrap shirt that it is a crop top shirt to, right under the breast sort of a thing. Which meant that patterning that was about the stretch, was about getting how long did it need to be to stretch and to make sure that it would anchor. So mine actually has 4 sets of anchor hooks, one on each side at the base, and then the decorative wrap layers over the top also hook. So there's a bunch of stuff going on in there that's taking the tension of getting this thing to work. So you can see here, I've actually got 2 rows of hooks. The silver ones take the main brunt of it, and then the wrap piece comes around and takes the black ones. They're color coded for a reason. Um, so that this way here, the decorative piece goes over and comes a little longer here. So that was part of it. And coming up with that base layer was actually not that bad. It's sleeves. Sleeves are pretty sleeve shaped. I think I hand drafted that pattern piece. Here's the, here's the other side, like so. You can see here's the outside. The hooks on that one are some of the underneath hooks here that connect to the various other sides, like so. So just making sure that it would anchor, fussing with the neckline to get it to lie where I wanted. The base part of the shirt wasn't too bad to make. I did a lining. It's lined in the same fabric. That's not too bad. What was the worst part of this entire project is the hood and the built-in decorative wrappings. Actually, I lied. We're gonna, let's see if I can make this. I'm gonna be small. We're gonna make this bigger. That still only kind of shows it. So this shirt wraps around a lot, and there's a bunch of complicated layers going on here. So this is a behind the scenes photo here, of Portman and Christensen, being, with better chemistry than they ever had on screen. Sorry, George Lucas, but it's true. In that they seem to actually be having fun together. But you can see, so here, she's clearly got it, like she's wearing the outfit, but it's also not fussed right. And this picture was actually really, really useful because it shows me some of the weird seam details in construction. One of my very favorite resources, and I think I've said this before, is always behind the scenes photos. For that battle jacket, that Captain America jacket, some of the behind the scenes photos show Chris Evans having pulled open the neck flap to get a little bit more air. And that shows me, oh, wait, there's a flap there. And this is how it's built. This is how it's put in there. Which, you don't see. Captain America never undoes his uniform. Blah, 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 blah. But behind the scenes photos absolutely do help show that kind of detail. There's other photos where they actually made in it's one of the later movies. It's not Avengers. It might be Age of Ultron. It might be Civil War, where they actually show that part of Chris Evans's suit is mesh, and like the red and blue or red and white striped belly panels come off, and then he's got like a mesh shirt on underneath, which makes perfect sense, but leads for some hilarious photos. Yeah. So what we're looking at here is you can see that construction and seam detail here. And if we come back over here, so this is a promo photo, right? If you come back over here, you can see there's a lot of wrapping, there's a lot of folds going on here, and I was really trying to figure out how to capture that. Like, how do I capture that and make it, how do I make it work? What do they do for her? How do I do for me? Um, and the answer was just a lot of trial and error and a lot of swearing. Um, I have lost track of how many drafts I went through, um, particularly to get the hood right. So you can see there's these big drapey swathes here, and there's this long sort of tail with beads on it here, and it falls off her shoulders like so, and that's all well and good. And then I started looking at the museum reference photos for my sins. So here we go. Pants. So it says it's pants. Crepe jersey, top, and pants. And it can't have been pants. I don't think. So skirt details. This shows it with the hood up, which she never wears it this way on screen, on camera. But you can put it up here, and that, again, because it's a different view, gives a lot of good information about how to put this together. Actually, we're going to open that. Cool. So I went to the museum and creeped on it with my camera here. So you can see a little more of the construction detail here. You've got it's folded here. The folds are integrated into the way the garment wraps. It's all, the hood and the shirt are all one piece. And I swore and I thought and I tried. I think it's like 10 or 12 different drafts before I figured out what was going on here. Or not. No, that's not even what I figured out. What I figured out is what I've done. I do not say that what I have is correct. But, and then this was the other thing, which is very exciting for a museum. They had it on display in a way you could see both sides of it. So this was an exhibit at the Denver Art Museum. I was home visiting my folks for Christmas. And so I was able to see the shape of the hood and this here, and I was able to see the seam detail. There's a seam from the point, the face back, but it only goes so far back. It stops like halfway down the back of her head, a little further down, but it stops probably before you get to her neck, really. So then I was like, well, but how does it, because if I'd had a back seam, that would have been okay. But there's not a back seam. And again, I probably could have just put in a back seam and been okay with it. But like, they didn't, which means there's a way somehow to do it. And then it was a challenge and a frustration. And like, oh my gosh, I had so much issues with this. I made a friend in England who's working on the same costume, and we started sending each other like little quick video clips of like, here's what I've done here, and here's what I've done here, and sort of commiserating and talking about how we'd solve different problems. And it was pretty great. So there's no hood back seam all the way down. It's a partial seam here. And like I said, like 20 different pattern sketches. Nope. Yep. So many sketches. So this is my stack of notes for this outfit. So they're all little like quarter sheet pieces here, of desperately. So some of them are like to-do lists, fine. Here's some of the skirt pattern pieces. This is, so I like to make sketches sometimes. I am a bad artist. I do not try to pretend to be a good artist. But I like to make sketches that kind of show what my current understanding of the outfit is. So that's one of these here. And then this is sort of me sketching out the two different sides of the outfit, left and right, so that I can kind of get a feel for what these are. And I started to label them E, F, whatever, to try and figure out And then I wrote out, okay, so this is that, this is what I think this looks like. Here's more skirt design pieces. I should have been doing these in the notebook, but I was doing them on random pieces of paper, so now there's that. Here's back to the shirt again. This one is based on the behind the scenes sketches. And I just kept trying to figure out, what are these? What are those? Just beating my dang head against what I thought it might have been. Here's some notes about how to fix the skirt, shorten it, extend it, figure those things out. I figured out some notes on the cape here, which is kind of cool. So, you know, that's the overall shape. So I said semicircles, that's not really what it looks like at all. It's really this sort of long egg shape here with the two sets of seams. There's a seam that runs along piece of the back of the, you know, sort of along the top of the shoulders. And then there's another seam a little further forward into the front, which is where the arms kind of go under those. It's not a full sleeve or anything, but and again, I found them in the pictures, so I copied them. So that's the cape pattern here, roughly. More notes. Write everything down. Again, some of these are good sketches, some of these are ugly sketches. And now we have somewhere I'm starting to try to figure out what the hood is. So here's some of my first ones where I'm trying to copy those photos I was showing you, right? Because that's where I always start, is copy the photos. So you see I've sort of copied those shapes. Here's the seam is only partway in there. So, all right, that's a starting point. Some of these are actually dated, which was smart of me to date them. And so I have some measurements of roughly what I think these might be. More cape numbers here. Some of these are dated like January, some of these are dated February, March. It was sort of a process of trying to solve it. And what I finally figured out is these last bits here. So I was in the shower and thinking about it, as you do. I don't know if you do good thinking in the shower, but I do some of my best thinking in the shower. Also, some of my best lightsaber choreography work, which is a bad thing to do in the shower. Don't do that, because if you're trying to figure out your lightsaber choreography and you step and you're in the shower, it's a bad time. So I don't recommend that. But I was just sort of thinking about the problem, and I had this sudden realization. So one of the things I had been doing for a while is looking at historical medieval hooded garments, because in medieval times a hood would be a separate garment that would be like the hood part, and it'd have like a long tail, and it would have kind of a piece that sort of came around to wrap around in front. So it's sort of like a balaclava, except, you know, more open in the face and like with a tail coming out. So like an individual separate garment that you would wear, like a hat thing. And so I'm thinking about those historical hoods, and I've looked up some of the patterns, and again, going back to my Society for Creative Anachronism roots, my medieval recreation roots, thinking about this, thinking about that. And the name for that tail, which is here. So I did eventually figure out what I thought it might have been. The name for this tail piece is called a liripipe. Liripipe, liripipe. I have no idea why, but I was trying to figure that out. And what I ended up thinking in the shower was realizing that part of that had to be cut on the fold of the fabric. Because if I cut it on the fold, then I can put that at an angle, cut that. I still have that top seam here, but I can get the shape of it to work a little bit better. And I'm in the shower, and I'm like, well, I can't forget that. Like, I have to remember this, but I also have to, you know, finish washing and dry myself off before I can go write anything down and put clothes on and all that. And so I started trying to remember the lyra pipe is on the fold, and I started singing that to the tune of Pink Floyd. The Lunatic is on the Grass from it's one of the tracks on the wall. And so I started singing to myself, the lyra pipe is on the fold. until I could remember and go write it down. And so in point of fact, that's what I wrote down here. And so there's my sketch once I thought I'd actually gotten it figured out. It's still not quite the final version, but it's pretty close. So you can see there's this maybe you can't because the color, there you go. So there's that seam here that stops, it doesn't run all the way down. Here's the tail, the lyra pipe piece. It was actually a little bit too long, so I had to shorten it in production, change it live, and sort of extend that out. And I put the nice little beads on there here. And there's an underneath, where'd it go? There it is. Figuring this thing out here. There's a seam here that runs right down the center back, but it's not the back of the hood. It's the shoulder wrap piece underneath it. So I had to put that seam in here and again, it's all there's a lot of swearing and a lot of to get that to work. But if I bring my mannequin back over here, let's just slide some things around. Take the cloak off. Everyone should have a fuzzy polar fleece cloak. It's the most amazing thing. All right. Stuff, come over here. This costume, so Captain America's name is Stephen Grant Rogers. When I do this, I go by Stephanie Ginger Rogers because I can do anything Cap can do, but backwards and in heels. And that just amuses me every single time. So we're going to take the jacket off. So unzips here. The great thing about this dress is it's actually a jacket that just comes off when I undo that hook. There we go. The great thing about this dress is it's easy to take off. It just unzips down the front, which I'm really pretty pleased with. That's a so now again, the mannequin is not me. She is shaped a lot like, but not exactly like me, and therefore the shirt doesn't fit her quite right. So it looks a little funky when I put it on her, but it will at least give some idea of what we're dealing with here. Like the shoulders are particularly not right, and since this is a shirt that relies a lot on how the shoulders sit, it's tricky. Also, I can't now remember which side goes where. Is that under? Yeah. So there's a lot of tension, and I gotta yank on this a little bit to get these things to fit properly. And I didn't even get that in the right one. There we go. But again, it's designed for that, and again, it fits me better than it fits the mannequin. Like so. These are the top wrapping pieces, which are currently out of the way. This piece comes over here. Sleeve. So this was designed to, so the base layers fit like so here. Sleeves drop. And then these decorative top wrappings cross over it like so. And again, there was a lot of but how and why and who designed this in this whole process. Sleeve. Then we come over here where again you can see those hooks. Like so. There's always a little bit of fussing. Here are the sleeves, which drop down here. And then that hood, which is kind of really hard to parse not on a person, starts to make a little bit more sense. Here we've got these wraps like so, and the hood falls down the back. And just like we see on Portman here, we've got a folded edge like so, but it bunches up and gathers here. So we actually see this really nice silver trim. I'm going to talk more about the silver piping trim next time. Yes, I have Miss Piggy as my lock screen. There we go. Ta-da. Here we go. So we've got this nice little silver piping detail here, which I'm really pleased with. I had to redo that because I managed to put it in backwards once, and was very sad about it, so I had to redo that. But you can see, and again, there's always a little bit of fussing, but you can see we've got this decorative wrapping kind of detail. And again, we come down and we come up. It is there. Oh, that's what it is. I'm supposed to twist some things, I think. Anyway, we'll have there's some conversations. Even when I wear it, it's easier, but I still have to have some conversations with the fabric about what if you stayed where I told you to be, and is that an option? Can you do what I tell you to? The answer is not always. But we've got this nice draping. It's not exactly like Portman's, but it's not bad. It does have, a lot of draping here. Here's that beaded Lyra pipe tail coming off the bottom of it, that has the seams in the correct location. If I ever wanted to wear the hood up, it would do roughly the things that we see it do on the mannequin. I'm probably not going to wear it up because she never does. And the whole thing is it's all washable, so the whole thing doesn't matter if I get wet in it or not. So I'm probably, it's not going to be a rain hood or anything here. So yeah, that's sort of, that, and like I said, there was a lot of despair and swearing. But yeah. All the seams are serged here, so they're nicely finished. The edges are cuffed over and hemmed, all that jazz. So yeah, it works. What are you trying? Yeah, no, it's the shoulders. It's really the problem here. We'll set that down. The problem is with the shoulders. The problem is that the shoulders of the mannequin and the shoulders of the me are not the same. So we have some conversations. But yeah, that is that project. That is where that currently stands. So when you're drafting your patterns, draft them. They will be drafts. Never hesitate to make more pieces than that. Let's see what else I was gonna say. Yeah. Other patterns. So if folks have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat at any point. Other things for pattern drafting. There's a lot of really good advice out there because people have been making patterns for I don't know how long, ages, and making garments. So if you want to adjust an existing garment, there's a lot of ways to do it, or an existing pattern. If you want to do something like modify the construction techniques, there's actually ways to do that. So let's see, we're going to come back over and grab more of our commercial patterns. Where is it? This one? It is this one. Cool. So a while ago, I made a Princess Leia costume based on a movie poster. So let me pull up those references. So I made a costume that is based on this poster here. I'll go ahead and close out these other windows. You can all admire my grading. It's just answer keys. It's not like it's student work or anything. So ye old classic Star Wars poster. back, back in the day. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, so I have chat questions. Questions on hoods. Do you add anything special to help them stay up on your head? So I don't, it depends on the size of the hood, right? So like my Jedi hood, the question is how do I keep it from like vanishing over the entire front of my face? Because it's a very big hood. Um, and in that case, what I do is I just find a balance point where it's on my head, but not down over my face. And I just sort of find a good balance point and it will stay there. Because it's wool and it's not very slippery. So the wool will kind of stay where I put it, which is nice. And like for most kids, like half the fun of having a hood is being able to put it up dramatically and then take it off dramatically. So I wouldn't personally want to anchor it. If you've got something that needs to stay exactly right, like if you've got like an Assassin's Creed hood where it's got to stay and it doesn't come on and off, it's a, closer fitting garment rather than a dramatic cloak. Then yeah, you could put like, I might put like little loops in it and then bobby pin it to your hair. Or wig would be sort of my suggestion to solve that problem to get it to stay. Um, you could put like wig clips in, like those little like grabby teeth bits that can anchor to your hair. Um, Again, if you do that and then you take it on and off and on and off, it'll mess up your hair. So, be aware of that. If you don't care, you don't care. That's fine. Um, let's see here. So you could, but I don't usually bother. Alyssa wanted to know, do you ever post or share your custom patterns? I mostly don't, just because they're for me and nobody else is my exact size and shape. So like sharing them when they're that custom isn't really useful. Now it can be, and like I said, I have talked to other people who are making this outfit about what my patterns looked like. And I'm happy to share things like my sketches. But in terms of like, here is exactly how you make this garment, well, you're not going to make exactly this garment. You need to make it to fit you. And you are not me shaped, whatever. So I don't usually do that just because I don't think it's that applicable. Um, I know lots of cosplayers who make and share patterns, and it's not out of any sense of like my secret. It's just a sense of, but they're so tightly custom, particularly like this bodysuit. Nobody else could wear this. Like somebody else might be able to put it on, but like I said, it's fitted to the exact curves of my calves and curves of my arms, and like just make your own. It would be easier for someone to make their own than to try to copy my pattern, or equally easy. And so at that point, custom make it for your curves, whatever your calves look like. Yeah. Yeah, so I was talking about pattern alteration. Feel free to drop more questions in as desired. So pattern alterations. So I made that Leia dress because I thought it'd be fun, because I thought it'd be a fun challenge. Because I had a bunch of extra linen, honestly, as part of why, is I ended up with some very lightweight sheer linen that I wasn't going to use for anything else. And I was like, I bet I can turn this into a Leia costume. So, again, here's our, classic Star Wars poster here. Neither of these costumes are film accurate. Like 3PO doesn't look quite right. R2 looks reasonably close. 3PO's got a little off in his face proportions and details. Luke keeps his shirt closed and doesn't wear that kind of shin guard or boot. Like those aren't, honestly, they look more like Vader plates than anything else. So Luke doesn't ever wear that. And he keeps his shirt closed. This kind of looks like Leia's ceremonial gown from the throne room, but not quite. And the belt isn't right. And the hair is her classic senatorial hair. So it's very much its own thing. And it's a painting. It's not a real thing. And like none of her gowns are slit quite that high. So I was like, but I want to make it. But I have some linen and it'll be fun and stuff. And so because it's almost the ceremonial gown, I looked at a bunch of ways other people had made that gown. And some of the things they'd done were they had recommended a particular commercial pattern. Thus, this is a vintage Mccall's pattern. I had to get it off of, I think, Etsy or eBay, one of the two. It is not modernly available. But, and it doesn't really quite look like, you know, it doesn't quite look like the dress in question, but it does, and like I was going to take the sleeves off anyway and stuff like that, but, and the neckline shape is all wrong. But what it has is this inverted V shape at the bust. Now you can't quite see it, you know, in the movie poster, it's all sort of, you know, delicate drapery or whatever, but I was copying this ceremonial, which has this very distinctive upside down point, or not upside down, but upside down V here, where the bust line curves upwards to a point, and then the skirt comes down from that, which is sort of unusual. So people recommended this pattern for that purpose, to have that, to fix that. I was like, okay, modifying the neckline is easy. You just adjust a curve. But one of the things I had to do, there are darts. There we go. There are dart lines right here. Those straight lines up her bust are fabric darts. And a dart is where you take the fabric and you fold in a little pucker into it to get it to do what you want. Under somewhere underneath my cloak. There we go. Oh, right, this is the other thing I was going to talk about. So this is this jacket here has 2 darts on it. So this is a mock-up, which you can probably tell because it's cheap bedsheet fabric with no finishing. And these lines here are darts. And on the inside, they look like this. They're little triangles of fabric that I took out of it. So I just, you know, and when you make a dart, you take your fabric and you go, whoop, and you sew a little triangle piece in. So you sew in a triangle, and then when you open it back out, now you've taken out a piece and the shape is different. So darts are used to fit curves. You see them very, very commonly as bust darts somewhere under here for clothes for people who have breasts, where you need to fit around curves. You see bust darts here. You'll see them sometimes along the waist or you know, front. You'll see them in the back as well, to take a straight piece of fabric and fit it to a curved human body shape. You don't just see them for women's clothing, although I think they are women's clothing. Although I think they are more commonly seen in that kind of dress or blouse that's a little more fitted. If you're making a boxy unisex t-shirt kind of a shape, you don't need darts on that. It's just a triangle or just a rectangle. Whether or not that fits your body is the shape doesn't need darts. And unisex is a bad term for those shirts anyway. But so here are these darts here. I don't normally use black thread, but again, this is a mock-up. So I used whatever was in the machine. I think this is actually some really gross black thread I was desperately trying to use up. So I was like, fine, the mock-up will take it. But you can see you sew in that triangle, and then you have that nice dart seam. So the Leia gown, the gown doesn't have any bust darts, but the pattern did. But I wanted to use the pattern because it had that up curve that I wanted. So I drafted out the bust dart. And that is a technique that you can look up how to do, drafting out darts, or drafting in if you want to add them in. But adjusting commercial patterns is very well understood. People know how to do that. And so look for tailoring information. Look for books or like actual print magazines, even sometimes, that have instructions on how to adjust patterns. Let me see if they're here. Yes. No. Okay, so I won half. I grabbed 2 books off the shelf, one of which was my Odyssey comic coloring book. Odyssey is a great comic, but wow, it's very trippy. But here we go. This is what I was looking for. Techniques for Casual Clothes. This is by the Threads magazine. They are a magazine for sewists, tailors, seamstresses, whatever you want to call it. I've seen, rather than using seamstress, I see people using instead sewist, which I think is because sewer looks like sewer, and you don't want to get those two mistakes. So I see sewist used as a less gendered term. Um, so Threads is a magazine for sewists, for people who sew and make clothing, and this talks about technique. So this is how to stencil things, and this one has, I believe, yeah. So like how to finish a coat or a jacket, how to sew these things here, like so. All of these things, if you look for these kinds of books, they will talk about how to add in a dart, how to remove this, how to do pleating. Here, a surprising turn of the pleat. Simple techniques for jacket construction and fabric manipulation. So if you want to take a commercial pattern and modify it, things like this have suggestions. And people who sow seeds. Yes, sower, sewer, sow it. Yeah. So, yeah. So people understand. The other thing that can be good that we understand how to do is if you ever need to move the armpit. So the hole here is called the armscye. Looks kind of like arm's eye. And if you need to move it to make it higher or lower, that will affect how easily you can move. And so if you have a garment that pulls weirdly, adjusting that can help. And how to do that is a very well understood technique. So do some internet research, do some library research. A lot of this stuff is stuff that's well understood outside of the cosplay community. So by all means, look for cosplay stuff. If you're making a cosplay, look for cosplay stuff. But if you're looking for how do I make a garment, this kind of thing is really useful too. I've got one somewhere. I think this is it here. Yeah. There we go. Jackets, coats, and suits here. So again, if you want to make these fancy jackets, and some of those styles are not modern. This particular book is from 1992, so there's an aesthetic, but the techniques are universal. So for instance, this talks about how to make a jacket sleeve, how to take a jacket sleeve that is normally a one-piece sleeve and make it into two separate pieces, which gives you a little bit, flexibility and variability in your construction. And it goes through, take the pattern, cut it apart here, adjust it here, manipulate it this way or that way. And all you have to do is do some math. Pattern drafting is so much about math. I like to joke when I'm designing, like, even if I'm designing like a skirt, something that seems really simple. My favorite joke is, well, I have to go math myself a dress now, because there's so much. If you're doing like a circle skirt, you've got to figure out how big around do you make the waist hole, how, if you want it to be so long, how many yards of fabric do you need to cut out that skirt. And there's a lot of math. If you're trying to do pleats, how much fabric do you lose into your pleats? If you're adjusting, there's just a lot of math and a lot of like geometry and calculations to figure these things out. So yeah, it's a little, you absolutely do need math. There's a scientist who she hasn't done it in a while because life, but who has occasionally talked about like it'll be like a big red carpet night like the Oscars or the Met Gala or something like that. And she'll do a Twitter thread talking about the engineering behind all of the dresses, particularly for those like strapless gown confections where you're like, how is it staying up? Math and engineering is the answer. Like the amount of construction that goes into the bodice of a strapless gown, particularly if it's then got a really full skirt underneath it. There's so much engineering in that, and so much careful pattern design and techniques of boning and lacing and corsetry and support, and where do you put the seams and how do you put them in there and what layers of fabric are you using on. And it's really great. The next time she does one, which who knows, she's got a kid now, who knows when there's going to be another red carpet, soon we hope, but still, um, we'll see, but I'll share that, and retweet that or whatever, because she does really cool stuff. And there's so much more science than people think about. At DragonCon, she and I and a few other people have more than once done a panel called The Science of Cosplay. Last year's was actually virtual, and so that's up on YouTube. I will track down a link for that, where we talk about things like what's the engineering involved and how do you make any kind of costume and garment and construction. And my very favorite thing that ever came out of that, and this is on the one on video, is the time that the blacksmiths were talking about how do you shape metal. And you can shape metal by dishing it down, or you can shape metal by dishing it out over something. And they're talking about, okay, well, you take your metal and you stretch it out over something, and as it stretches, it starts to wrinkle, and you stretch it, and you get these wrinkles that you then fold together and beat the wrinkles out. And I was like, so you're telling me you put darts in the metal? And it was one of my favorite moments of being able to talk about how the fabric manipulation and the metal manipulation, completely different techniques, but the same underlying principles of, okay, I gotta fit this over a curve, which means I take a flat thing and I gotta, stretch it, and I gotta move some things out of it and around it to make it fit this curve. And I was just like, it was just such a cool moment of synchronicity of like, yeah, we do it, the sewists do it this way and the blacksmiths do it that way, and we're both fitting flat things to curved surfaces, which was super, super cool. Yeah. So let me show you this here, which I had meant to do earlier and then completely forgot. So when Alyssa and I were first pitching the idea for the Geek Girl Cosplay series, I was like, well, I could do a project that's in progress, or I could do one that's mostly finished. And I decided, as you have figured out, to do one that's mostly finished, because that way I knew I'd finished it. Whereas the project I'm about to share with you here is in process, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to get it to work, but I'm not sure. So I kind of didn't want to commit to showing that to all of y'all. But this is my mock-up. The interior of it is fresh garbage. None of the seams are finished. They're all ugly thread, and I just clip the thread ends and just let them be in the way, because it's a mock-up and I don't need to bother with that stuff. But this is a cute little historically inspired cropped jacket. It is referred to as a Spencer, after the Earl of Spencer, who it's named after him. He didn't come up with it, but I think he popularized the style here. And this particular pattern, like so, is if you go on any kind of costuming YouTube and you look for Hamilton Spencer, the pattern is based on one that was designed by the same designer who did the costumes for the Broadway show Hamilton. That Hamilton. And so what they did is, when Broadway shut down in March of 2020, Broadway shut down. And there's so many pieces and some industries that rely on Broadway. And so in order to try to keep the costume industry afloat, they got together some people to put together this pattern and release it to sell, to raise money for the costume industry. And we're not just talking the people who make the costumes, we're talking the people who make the silk flowers, the people who do the cleaning and the pressing, and all of these intricate trim details that this entire costume industry. So sales of the pattern support the Broadway Costume Industry Coalition. and it's, like I said, it's based, it's not exactly stage used, but it's close to it. And it is historically inspired, but also very Broadway inspired. And so we have this little crop jacket here, with the long sleeves and these little puff sleeves. You can see that because it's a mock-up, I didn't bother to put a puff on both sides. I kind of wanted to see if I wanted to make the puffs. So I made this sleeve without and this sleeve with the puff, and I was like, I like that. It looks cute. I'll do that. Like so. So part of the mock-up was to check the fit. Did I need to change these darts or not? And I don't think I did, honestly. I think I pretty much kept it as is, which is lucky. Many times one does that. You make a mock-up and you're like, oh, that doesn't fit me at all. But I decided that I liked the way it fit. So it has this sort of cute little arch up in the back here. There's going to be a belt on. One of the things about mock-ups is I often don't bother with half the pattern pieces. So there's a belt that goes on here, but I was like, that's not going to change the fit or anything. I don't want to deal with it. So there'll be a belt piece here. It's got this really interesting seam detail placement here. So the shoulder seam is actually back here. And the front of the garment wraps all the way around to the back of the shoulder, which is historically accurate, but unusual in a modern garment. So that was kind of a neat thing to experiment with. There we go, is these shoulder seams here. And again, so looking at the construction detail, like the collar, and the lapels are going to be standing. They're going to pop up based on this is a bed sheet. The real garment is not a bed sheet. So they'll pop up here, but I wanted to kind of experiment with how the collar went in there, because that's a little weird. Get the shapes of the darts and everything right. Get the shapes of the sleeves. And this is a 2-part sleeve. Actually, I think you might be able to, because I'm a smart person, I made this sleeve backwards, so you can actually kind of see a little better here. There's one sleeve seam. There's one sleeve seam here, and then another one down here, so that you get a better fit. You can more easily adjust if you've got, rather than one piece that goes all the way around like this. If you've got 2 pieces, you can more easily adjust the size of it a little bit, and the shape of it can be a little more fitted, because your arm doesn't move in all directions equally. It turns out, right? Your elbow bends this way, but it doesn't bend the other way much. Mine doesn't at all. Some people are, double jointed, but whatever. It doesn't go backwards terribly much. So you need more curve here than you do to go that way. So having a 2-piece sleeve lets you sort of adjust for that in the pattern. So that's my mock-up, which is also sort of sitting here to shame me into working on it. The jacket for that is going to be super cool. I have the most. It doesn't come off on camera, but we're gonna try it anyway. The most amazing ivory silk taffeta. It washes out and it looks white, but trust me, it isn't. It is this really gorgeous pale cream, and it's very crisp, and it basically looks like it's made out of parchment paper, except that it's silk fabric. And then, because I can, come on, all of you. There's one missing. Where are you going? My pieces are attempting to run away and hide from me. No, you will be shown off on camera. I'm proud of you. Dang it, come back. So the pattern calls for these super interesting petal details, so that on top of the sleeve puff, we've got these flower petals basically that fit on there. And the instructions call for them to be tone on tone, so that everything is made out of the same, in this case, ivory silk. But I was like, but what if I didn't do that? So these are my finished, is that the right orientation? No, it's this way here. So they're still tone on tone, These are a different kind of light silk here, like so, so that these three here will fit on the garment like so here. So they go on and they basically cover that little sleeve puff like so. So that's one sleeve here. And then the other sleeve is red, yellow, orange, red, orange, yellow. Like, I think it actually, you put the middle one on top, like so. And so it'll end up having this rainbow color effect on the sleeve details. Um, and there'll be some other fun trim effects. There's trim that goes on the front here, which again, it's a mock-up. I don't bother to deal with a mock-up. But we'll have that trim there. We've got these rainbow sleeve accents here. And I think it's going to be really fun. So I'm hoping to get that done by the end of the summer, but I didn't want to commit to putting that as the main Geek Girl project, Geek Girl cosplay project, because what if I don't get it done? I didn't want to have that stress. So, but here's the mock-up. I will, touch base on that. Thank you. Yeah, no, I really love the colors here. You never quite know what you're going to get if you order fabric online. Without getting swatches. Always get swatches, but I didn't bother to because I was just ordering like a little bit, and so I picked based on what I had, what the photos look like. But I'm really pleased with how these came out here. And then the other thing that I've done for this, so I'm going to be wearing them over a pair of stays, which is what modern people tend to call a corset, but the historical name in the 1790s, 1800s was stays. So this is part of the stays that goes here. And I was like, what if instead of just being, stays, what if I made rainbows? So I hand pieced this rainbow here, and that'll go center front, and then the jacket will sort of be over that. So it'll help cover that a little bit. Because I could. So this was exceptionally tedious to make, but I'm really proud of how it came out, even if the color is washing it out. I will have to figure out somebody who knows how to deal with lighting to photograph things, because that's not me. But this is why I, make friends and or recruit professionals to help me with these things. Pay professionals, I should say. Recruit and pay. So that's my offshoot. It is on brand for being Pride Month, so you have some rainbows. Other questions or thoughts on any of these things? Keep an eye on the chat here. I'm attempting to watch the chat. Aw. Kaz says he'd be happy to make the attempt. I will touch base with you. We'll see. It's not going to be immediate. I have to make a lot of trim, because even though I've done some of these, there's still trim that goes here. There's piping that I have to make that goes all around, and then there's these fancy details that go here. So it's still in process. Yeah. So that brings us, perhaps a silly question, but are there materials that should never be used in the same outfit? I mean, I can't think of like any materials that like catch fire when exposed to each other, which would be my real concern for something like that, is like, are they going to catch fire? I try not to use Velcro in fabric that can get snagged by Velcro. So like things like that. My usual feeling is that like once you started to use silk, use that for everything. But you certainly can mix and match polyesters and synthetics and natural fibers or whatever you want to do. I'm looking at an outfit. It's like a 2022, 2023 build. It's not a current build, but I'm looking at one that canonically was the top layer was silk and some of the bottom layers were a synthetic polyester that behaved the way the costume designer wanted it to behave. So she mixed and matched. in which case, yeah. I go with whatever looks good in terms of materials. I think there are very few materials that are like chemically incompatible with each other, in which case like one would catch fire or not. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. In terms of like if you're doing historical recreation and you've started using natural fibers, then you may as well use natural fibers for everything, but that's different. How many concurrent projects am I usually working on? Don't ask that question. I don't want to have to answer it. So right now I've got the Hamilton jacket is my main project, and I'm still not fully finished with the pod. Like the Padme's not off my list because my friends at Optimistical Studios are making the crown for me, and I need to study. I need to at some point go down and visit them and do a fitting and get that sort of tweaked and finished. So that's not completely done, but it's not active. Um, I am. I've got several others that I'm daydreaming about. Like so, I keep a list here. I do them on index cards. That's my Book Rex index card. So I've got one for Halloween 2022, Madame Lavoisier. That's a historical. Queen's Shadow, Padme on Alderaan. Celebration. It just says Celebration 2020X because I don't know when the next Star Wars celebration is. But it's not. That's a future project. My Resistance X-Wing pilot for my American Girl doll, which is about halfway done. Oh, don't talk to me about this one. This is the project that was going to be done in 2015 that still isn't and may never be. We're just going to put that back here. I want to do an Overwatch costume someday, but this is also still very pie in the sky. I've got a couple of ideas. I want to do Zuko as a Sith, so like a clean mashup of Prince Zuko and a Star Wars Sith character that very clearly reads as both of those things. I have a bunch of pieces for that. I only have to do about 2 or 3 things to really make that read. I have one of my Jedi characters is going to fall to the dark side, and I have notes and fabric for that, but I haven't started the build yet. That's going to be an easy build because I've made that costume before. Yes. Sorry, as you read my cards here, my Overwatch ideas are Moira or Reaper, one of Reaper's kits. We'll see, maybe. So I have a bunch of notes for when General Piva goes to the dark side. I have my Hamilton costume, which is labeled Rainbow Honk, because Dragon Con. It's a long story. It's because Dragon Con is the real answer for that. That's unrelated here. Padme's midriff outfit here that I've got some notes. This is kind of depressing because the deadlines keep updating here. It was originally it was June 2020. Then it was going to be August 2020 for Celebration, but I had to update Celebration to 2022. I was aiming for September 2020 for the start of the academic year. And I've got the sewing done. I have a note that I finished the sewing October of 2020. So I got it done. Basically, I got it done to here and wore it for Halloween that year for a virtual hangout. And now I've got a new deadline of September 2021 for a short film that I'm going to be part of. But actually, I want to make a different Padme costume for the film. So my current actual projects that I'm actually actively working on are the Hamilton Rainbow Honk, finishing up Tatooine Midriff, and then seeing if I can put together one of Padme's Clone Wars costumes by September. I can if I manage to keep focus, honestly. If I manage to keep focus and work on some of this stuff every day, I can get that done. I just have to keep focus, which has been rough because pandemic, but I might be able to make it work. We'll see. So some of these are yeah. Some of these are totally backburnered. Some of these are just pie in the sky ideas. Some of them are, and some of my costume ideas are still just reference folders. Like I've put together a card for this one here. I've got a reference folder of notes, and it might stay there forever, or I might go ahead and decide to make it. But it costs me nothing to have written down the idea and to have grabbed a bunch of reference photos. And if I never touch it, I never touch it. It's not like I've committed. It's not like I've spent money yet. Like when I start spending money is when I try to be like, okay, I'm really going to do the thing. Um, some of these aside, because anyway, um, some of them I don't. Geek Girl group costume. Yes, we should do group costumes. I love doing group cosplays. The Yeah. If anyone else is interested in doing an Avatar: The Last Airbender Star Wars mashup, I am 100% in for that. Like I said, I've got Zuko. You want to do Brigitte? Oh yes, you should do Brigitte. I've got another friend who has a couple really nice Brigitte outfits. Um, and yeah, I want to do Scientist Moira because she's got a weird lab coat. Like it's not like a lab coat. It's got like weird overlapping panels and like purple lining and stuff. And so I kind of want to do that. Um, Plus, it means I could do that without having to build that backpack rig. Like I could, but I don't dislike props, but they're not my specialty. I do costumes. I do fabric. I do leather. I do some other cool stuff, but I props are just like I've done a little bit of props. This actually here. Let's see if I can get my. I've done like belt buckles and accessories and stuff. So like I did this out of Warbla, but it's literally there's the craft foam with one layer of Warbla over the top of it, and then I painted it. It's not what we call fancy. So I like to, like I don't really want to have to build the backpack rig. For Moira is sort of my feeling on that. Kaz is more of a customer than a costumer. That still counts. If you buy your costumes, that 100% counts. It's fun. Do the thing. Don't ever let anyone give you crap about it. If you enter a costume contest, they will often say you have to have made 70%, in which case, fine, but that's for a contest. If you're just wearing it because you want to be that character, spend the money, wear it with pride. I actually just impulse bought a costume because I mentioned, I've been thinking I would do something from the Picard TV series uniforms because they're really good. And my friend was like, here are the eBay links. And I went, I'm sorry, they want $30 for that shirt? Sold. Because I couldn't make that for 30 bucks. And even if I could for the fabric, the cost of like the blood, sweat, and tears of designing that, I was like, that is easily worth 30 bucks to me. So I bought that and it'll be here in a while and it'll be great. Buy things, make things, whatever, you still get to be part of the community. You still get to dress up and have fun, and that's what counts. So yeah. That is about time. I have been told, generally speaking, that I should keep it around 2-ish hours. So let's see. Coming next here this month on Twitch. Today is June 8th. We are here with Geek Girl Cosplay. This Thursday we have a Pride celebration happy hour. So we're gonna talk cocktails and mocktails. Let's see. On the 13th, GeekGirlCon RPG, Horns of the Hunted. Next week, we're going to have Geek Girl Talks Loki. Loki premieres tomorrow or tonight, maybe, if you stay up late enough. In theory, does it drop on East Coast time? Is it live now? I don't know. If the viewership suddenly drops to 0, we'll know why. Geek Girl Talks Loki. We've got a POC creator showcase coming up. A couple other things later in the month, celebrating Pride. I love the rainbow artwork here. So, yeah. Volumnia wanted to know, is there a good hub I have found to source commissions? Alyssa thinks Loki is at midnight tonight. Okay, cool. So Alyssa says midnight. So hold off on that. Is there a good hub I have found to source commissions? So like I said, so my friend just handed me the eBay link and was like, here. And he said these particular this particular seller has done a lot of research and has done a lot of fan sourced research. So it's sort of, people were like, here's what we want, and then hand it off to this manufacturer. So that was a personal recommendation. Um, I don't know if there's a good single hub. Like, I know some people within the Star Wars community who take commissions. Um, and I also know a lot of, like, it depends on what you want, right? So if you're looking for Rebel Legion, 501st Legion, Saber Guild, if you're looking for the groups that, by the grace of Lucasfilm go us, and therefore are looking for screen accurate perfection, you probably need to commission that from somebody else who's in that community. Because if you buy stuff off of the big cosplay suppliers, it just doesn't meet those standards, which are very exacting. But if you just want to be a Star Wars character, there's plenty of great stuff out there. There's a bunch of like Chinese manufacturers and sellers who have some excellent like, I'm more familiar with their Marvel stuff, that have some really nice Avengers and other Marvel characters stuff. Some of them work in leather, but I don't know that there's a single hub that they're all tied into. I see a lot of it by joining groups for specific characters. So like, or looking at people's Instagram posts where they say, "Oh, I got this from here. I got suit from here, or suit from there, or whatever," and they credit the different creators and suppliers. And that's kind of where I find things. So like, I purchased one of my MCU Captain Marvel suit. So I made this, as I said, but for the MCU suit, it was so detailed, and I was so emotionally invested in that character and that costume, it was easier to buy it. Which sounds weird, right? Like, you would think, oh, if you're emotionally invested, you should just make it. But the answer is that I would have agonized. I would have wound myself into a spiral over every single detail. And it was easier to just buy it and let someone else do that. And then I'm like, look, I'll wear it. I know it's not perfect, but it's good enough. And then I get to be Captain Marvel sooner and faster and with less personal anxiety. So in that case, spending money was absolutely the right choice. And I found that particular supplier by just looking around in the Captain Marvel Facebook group that I'm part of. I hate Facebook. It is of the devil, but it is a good way to connect with people in various cosplay communities. To have closed groups where everyone shares their research around a certain character or a certain property or whatever. So I don't like it, but it's useful. And like I said, I have a lot of cosplay on Instagram where people do credit what they've done. So that's also a good source to find them. Yeah. So I think that's what I got. Thank you for coming. Make sure you tune into additional GeekGirlCon content here. Same bat time, same bat channel. And other than that, I will be back next month on the second Tuesday of July, whenever that is. I honestly have no idea without looking it up. No, wait, I have it written down on a piece of paper. July 13th. I will be back July 13th to talk about detail, decoration, and couture finishes. So we're going to talk about the beading detail. We're going to talk about the fabric stamping detail. We're going to talk about painting and dyeing fabric. And we're going to talk about wigs. So we'll talk, this kind of thing where you just put it on, and a lot of different sort of styling and selection and wig design and construction. So yeah, 2 more in this series. And so come back on July 13th for more of this. Come back later this week and next week for more fun Geek Girl content. Other than that, yeah, thank you. Happy Pride. Be excellent to each other. And I will see you next time.